In 2 Kings chapter 5, page 73 it starts on your books. And the title of the lesson is God Heals. And we're going to be talking about somebody today that gets healed by some leprosy. After being reluctantly, he became obedient to God. But just thinking about heals, sometimes when we think of something getting healed, we think about a medicine or a doctor or an ailment that makes us physically better. But we know in God's eyes, healing can also mean taking us out of this world and carrying us on up. We know that this world is just a temporary place, and ultimately, it's better to be with Him than to be on this earth. Talking about that young boy, can't imagine, especially having kids, it just hits closer to home. And was trying to describe it even to Kelson at 2.5 years old, just telling her, he's with Jesus now. And she was like, give him some medicine. At 2 years old, she thinks, medicine can help. But ultimately, that young boy got a better healing than any doctor or anybody could ever do. And that's hard to comprehend, and I can't imagine being those parents. But ultimately, he's in a better place right now. He's healed. And sometimes, and Joey talks about this a lot, people want to ask questions, well, why would a God do that? Why would a God? That's not for, I don't have those answers. But God has a reason, and we got to trust in His will and His plan and know that ultimately it's for the better good. But to give a background about some of the things we're going to be reading today, we talked about Elijah and kind of led into Elisha last week. It says Elisha requested a double portion of Elijah's spirit. And it talks about some of the things that Elisha had did here leading up here. It says a widow of one of the sons of the prophets faced financial hardship after her husband's death. And Elisha multiplied the amount of oil she had so that she could pay her debt and live on what was left. It wasn't Elisha himself. It was God allowed him to do these things. But the person we're going to be reading about today is Naaman, a captain of the king of Aram's army, Syria, contracts a serious skin disease here. And when Naaman came to the king of Israel, the king did not know what to do, but Elisha did. And we're going to read here into these verses. If you keep reading there on 74, it'll kind of go ahead and give away what's going to happen. If you've read ahead, But let's go ahead and get in to the verses here today. 2 Kings chapter 5, starting in verse 1. It says, Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. So, it says Naaman had everything going for him here. And it talks about that here in this verse. He's a commander of an army, so aka he's important. He's somebody that's, like the lesson here says, highly regarded. He's not just a soldier. He's a captain. He is high up in there. But it says, although it was a pagan nation, the Lord had used him to give the Arameans a military victory. But what does it say here too? He was a leper. And we know, just reading in the Bible, skin lesions could be nerve damage and ultimately disfigurement. And those with these skin conditions were considered unclean and therefore socially isolated. It's all throughout the Bible, and we can read it in multiple stories where lepers were kind of put to the side. They're kind of isolated. You didn't want to, be around them, right? But really not just physical. Don't just look at it from a physical standpoint about a sickness, but also our past could put us isolated from the world. We are very bad, just human nature, about grouping people. Here's the good people. Here's the bad people. Here's the Christians. Here's the when in reality, we've all got things that could isolate us if people wanted to. But again, so you got Naaman, he's got everything going for him, so think about somebody, you can think in our country, maybe a military leader or maybe a politician, think of somebody top dog, and now he's a leper, but maybe not so bad yet that everybody knows it, because he's still wandering around kind of in public. But it says he would have been desperate for a cure, and we know But basically, if you were a leper here, you were avoided. So how are you going to get healed if nobody's wanting to touch you, lay hands on you, or because they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to get something, right? Going on, let's read verses 2 through 6 here. It says, "And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife." So we got a servant here. "And she said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of leprosy." So you got this little servant here saying, my God could get it cured. "And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now, when this letter is coming to thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman, my servant, to thee, that thou mayest recover him of leprosy." So a lot of stuff happens there in those 4 verses. So it says Syria had became a dominant people militarily and economically by the time of we're reading here. They had a reputation for attacking a land, capturing its peoples, and bringing the captives back. This is how the little maid came to serve Naaman's wife. So by capturing God's people at some point in time here, capturing this maid, it very well may have saved Naaman's life. And you think about that, again, God can use people. He can use people that aren't even Christians to put things in order that, again, we don't understand right now, but later is going to have some profound effects. Again, we've always heard that God works in mysterious ways. God works in ways we don't understand. So this servant here to this wife, if it wasn't for her, who knows what would have happened with Naaman. But she says, I know where you need to go to get cured of this, right? And think about that again. Just history in itself. We've all been in school. Do people in high power ever listen to servants? No, it's opposite, right? But with God, anything's possible. And he's used this for his glory here, we're going to see. So it says, Naaman's desperation is revealed in the fact that he was willing to take a word of a young female servant. It says, the king gave Naaman his full support and offered to send a letter to his Israelite counterpart. And along with the letter, Naaman took hundreds of pounds of silver and gold and 10 changes of raiment. So, again, let's pause there. You got a commander in an army. You got a king that ultimately is going to listen to a female servant. And we know in these times, that just, that was taboo. That wouldn't really be happening, right? So ultimately, we can see here, human nature. When people want to survive, they will do anything. They'll end up doing anything. It's just human nature. But it says these verses clearly reveal that Naaman was willing to pay dearly for his healing. He was willing to let go of his pride, prestige, riches, and rank in order to be healed. He was a desperate man otherwise. But I'll think about that, and you go back where it talks about the silver and the gold. Just as our world today, back then, people thought money would save them. He doesn't understand that who he's going to see doesn't need money, doesn't need any of that to do it. There's not a price. There's not a premium he's got to pay. There's not going to be a copay when he gets to the door. He don't know that, though, right? Just as our world today, they think money could fix things. And that's why he's carrying all this. And we'll see, actually, what Elisha says when he, don't want to spoil it if you hadn't read it, but offers to pay it. Going on, verse 7, it says, And it came to pass, when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes and said, Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. So it says he rents his clothes, right? King has concern for life, security. It says he was worried about his own life, though. The king of Aram had sent the letter asking Israel's king to do the impossible to heal Naaman of his leprosy. So, if you really want to read there, even Israel's king thinks it's impossible to heal this guy leprosy, right? It says that there. Verse 8, though, it says, And it was so, when Elisha, the man of God, had heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. So, it says Elisha accompanied the elder prophet Elijah in the final days of his ministry. We know that. And as the final request, Elijah had asked for double the power. And he indeed was the prophet of God for the nation of Israel, and the time had come for him to step on to the national scene. So again, Israel's king thinks this is a setup. He thinks, man, you sent this guy, a leper, for me to heal, and I can't do it. And I'm going to send him back not healed, and then you're going to come and fight us. And Elisha steps up. You know, God obviously was telling him that it was his time to glorify him, not his time to shine for his own benefit. But he needed to show a foreign land that his God was the only one capable of a healing like they were about to see. Just like our world today. You know, it's not a boastful, it's not an ego, it's not a I'm right, you're wrong. But ultimately, we know there's only one way to heaven, and that's through Jesus Christ. There's only one God. You know, you'll hear in school, well, they all believe in one God, they just call them different things. Or, well, you know, they have a few different multiple gods, but they still, no. If you don't believe on Jesus Christ, you don't have it. And that's just the bottom line. And if us as Christians fully believe that, we need to be making sure the world knows that. And there's a way to go out there and tell these things. It's not like we got to beat people over the head. But let's keep reading here that Naaman's about to see. That the God that Elisha is praying to is the only one that can do it. So it says, with all of his horses and chariots, servants and royal gifts, Naaman shows up at the door. But Elisha here sends a messenger out, it says, right? And he tells him, go wash in the Jordan 7 times. So the next verses, 11 through 12, we'll talk about. But again, think about your Naaman. And I'm probably about to go ahead and read what it probably says up under these things because I only highlighted a few things. But let's just read 11 and 12 while we're at it. It says, But Naaman was wroth and went away and said, Behold, I thought he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and strike his hand over the place and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in rage. So, Naaman says, accustomed to being shown honor, expected Elisha to come outside and meet him. So again, he's still got that egotistical mind. He's about to be ate up with lesions all over his body. Nobody's going to want to be around him, not even the people that's his friends. And he still thinks, this guy needs to show me some honor, right? He's not worried about getting healed. He's worried about somebody still respecting me. And I think about this. We don't need to let our ego, we don't need to let our pride harm our relationship with others, and most importantly, Christ. You know, if we're too afraid to pray out in public, or we're too afraid to have discussions with people, ultimately, we're failing. We're falling short. We don't need to do that. But what does it say here that Naaman did? He talked about the rivers that he thought was better than the Jordan. You know, I've never laid my own eyes on the Jordan River, so I'm going on what it says here. But it says both of these rivers, and I'm probably butchering their names, Abana and Pharpar, it says would have been more attractive than the muddy waters of the Jordan. Thus, to dip in the Jordan or any of the waters of Israel would have been an insult to Naaman's national pride. You know, I kind of go back to that old saying here, don't judge a book by its cover. You know, trust God. Trust what He's saying. You know, because God don't work like our minds do. We look at something and go, well, that don't make sense, right? You know, that don't make sense. Again, if we told the world, have the faith, the trust of a belief of a mustard seed, like the faith of that, you could move a mountain, right? That doesn't, to our mind, what, you telling me if I believe just a little bit on the Lord, I could move a mountain? That don't make sense to the world. But to God it does. And do we have that belief? To trust Him, and think about it, we're going to read here kind of Naaman's mindset, and again, some servants change his mind again. So 2 lowlies of the low, different times here in a few verses, work to the benefit of God. Goes on, verse 13 says, And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee to do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather then, when he saith to thee, Wash and be clean? Then went he down and dipped himself 7 times in Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. You know, that's clear right there. We don't even need an analysis. But it says Naaman's reaction is a reminder that some people become entangled by the simplicity of the gospel. We talk about that a lot. Joey talks about that a lot. Kind of says, what do you mean? All I need to do is believe and put my faith in Jesus? Surely I need to do some kind of good works to be saved. It can't be that simple. It's kind of saying that's what our world thinks. And I wrote some things here. So it is simple. But let's talk about the things that how we have made it complicated. And not saying these things are wrong, not saying people can't be saved in these ways, but how many times have we heard stressed to us, the ABCs, you got to admit, believe, confess, you got to do every bit of that. Or how many times have you got to go down to an altar, you know, or you got to have this special feeling, you know, all that stuff, right? When in reality, there's multiple verses over and over and over, and you can just Google it, and you can see, and I did, there's hundreds. Just believe. That's all you got to do. You just got to have faith and believe on the Lord to have salvation. And that's kind of where Naaman's at. And his servants say, you've came this way. Imagine if we were told to do something, all you got to do is just go dip 7 times. And I kind of gather in their mindset, and you know, this is just my analysis, not saying this exactly is how they believed it, but it's kind of like I get that, what's the worst that can happen, man? You're ate up with a disease, go dip 7 times, the worst comes to worst. If this God isn't real, you're not going to be healed. But if so, you're going to be clean. And it don't say that this happened, you know, like some antibiotics over a week or so. It says he dipped, and when he came out, his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. That's the way God works. He doesn't need biology and science to say, well, you know, you're going to take a Z-Pack, you're going to take 2 today, and for the next 4 days, take 1. It don't work that way with him. If he wants it done, it's done, right? And that's the way this happened. It says the servants understood the larger picture, that Elisha had not been impressed with Naaman's position and rank. And you know, that goes back to what we talked about a week or so ago. There's no respect of persons. God looks at us all and says, basically, hey, you're either going to heaven or you're going to hell. There's not going to be no titles or, you know, president or senator or anything like that. It says Naaman's healing couldn't be purchased, and the gift of healing was only going to occur as a result of Naaman's act of humble obedience. And I don't know why, but when I read that, I thought of that song we sing in here, like, trust and obey. You know, God will bless us. He will. If we believe on Him and we do His work and we obey what He says, He'll bless us with His own blessings. You know, it's in His timing. It's not necessarily what we're thinking about, but He will. And do we really believe that? I do. Again, He's blessing me to me in my own head. You know, I may get irritated and frustrated when I hear all that crying, but He's blessing me with being able to hear that and just, you know, being able to be blessed that my child's here with me right now. And sometimes we just let the world and we let our emotions and get all frustrated and irritated when in reality, we're just blessed to wake up every day. You know, my granddad got some rough cancer. He's blessed to be here. You know, it's not saying you're blessed to have cancer. You're blessed to be walking this earth. God doesn't have to let us wake up one more day. But again, sometimes we just get in our own mindsets. Well, my hip's hurting today. Or skinned my finger yesterday. You know, just the silliest stuff when none of that matters, and we're blessed just to be here. And as long as we're here, we need to be talking to people about Him. You know? I'm sure Naaman went off here and started telling people more about it too. And we'll see. It says, because he was willing to humble himself and obey what God had spoken, Naaman was changed. Not only was his skin changed, but his heart changed. It says, Naaman led everyone with him to return to Elisha's home and declared God to be the one true God who alone was worthy of worship. You know, I'm going to read 2 more verses here that it leaves out. I don't know why I think they're important. But, you know, I think this is really, you could use Naaman And there's multiple, but to me it really hit home on this one. I don't know why. So if somebody says, pray for our leaders and all, let's turn to this. Just remember this Sunday school lesson if you can about Naaman. Why should we pray for our leaders? And I wrote this, you think about it, if we pray for our leaders to turn to God, their followers could be changed as well. And we see that here with Naaman. I'm going to read you these verses. So everybody that was with Naaman. So the next verses that it leaves off, starting in 15, it says, "And he returned to the man of God," so he returns to Elisha, "he and all his company, and came and stood before him. And he said, Behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. Now therefore, I pray thee, take a blessing of thy servant. But he said, As the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused." So, Naaman acknowledges that, hey, there's no other God like this. This is the God. This is the one and only. And here, Elisha, take all this stuff I brought you. Take all this money and all this. And Elisha's like, I don't need it. And you ain't going to need it. None of us are going to need it. And really, to me, again, it just shows that God, He'll work with anybody. He'll work on anybody. He doesn't need money. And there's multiple scriptures, I think. And when I see something reiterated, whether it's in any type of book or anything, especially in the Bible, I think it's important to know. And I don't think it's a sin to have money, but I think God reiterates through multiple writers. He has no care. He doesn't care if all the money in the world burn up, because to Him it's all His and He owns it anyway. That doesn't speak to Him. And we see it here. Naaman tries to pay him, and Elisha's like, nah, don't need it, man. I'm just blessed to be here and allow you. And, the payment that you're getting is that you're going to go tell people about what's happened here today. And that's what we need to do. When we sing, our salvation just alone, but everything else that happens in our life, all the other blessings, we need to tell people about it. I don't know, maybe I've gotten soft, but when I have kids, I always use my kids as an example. But you think about that. The biggest blessing in the world for multiple reasons is a baby. Think of everything. The science world wants you to think of how everything, but just think. God, it says He knew us before He formed us in the womb. Think of everything that baby goes through those entire 9 months, and it all points back to God. Yeah. Every bit of it. That's just a big blessing. Yeah. So we can use things in our life. Maybe we haven't been healed of leprosy, but I'm using my granddad as an example. And there's still 2 weeks here left, but there were some that said, nah, don't look so hot. And it may not in the end, it may not. But on their timeline, it was like, not in God's time. There's a reason. I believe for every breath we take, there's a reason we're still here. And, if Marie lives to be 150, there's a reason she'll be here at 150. If I fall over right now, there's a reason for it. I don't have the answers to it. But I'll tell you this, it shows us that life is super short and our time here is temporary, and that we need to take every opportunity we have to tell those about Christ. Because we don't know when our last moment's going to be. And I think that's our duty as Christians, that as long as we're walking on this earth, that as much as we can, everything we need to be doing points back to Christ. Hannah and I went to a concert the other day, and it was a country concert, so I kind of knew probably what I was walking into, But I wasn't going for what other people may have been going, but I'll tell you what, it was disturbing. And I'm just going to put it as blunt as I can. Everybody out there listening, I told Hannah, I said, this is the trashiest thing I think I've ever attended in my life. Like, it's just sad. But and here's the sad part, though, really, and y'all should feel good, you older generations, and even my generation should feel good for this point. It wasn't y'all's generation that was acting up. It was people younger than me. And I'm like, it was in droves. I said it like this, it looked like Woodstock. And I told Hannah, I said, I know we're I was very irritated. Very irritated. Y'all can all imagine. I mean, I like music. I like listening to people sing. I got no problem with that. But just the atmosphere, it's just a sad state. I mean, I told Hannah, I said, this is our future. This is the future. I mean, kids walking around, not even old enough to drink, and we're drinking. Probably 14, 15 years old. And I was like, how is this happening, number one? But, you know, it's just sad, man. It's sad that you can't even go anywhere and even enjoy anything just for, you know, Joey says, for entertainment. That's our human nature. We like being entertained. But you can't even go anywhere and it just be appropriate, period. And it's sad because really, as Christians, we're getting isolated. We're becoming isolated. The enjoyment is probably going to be in your backyard cutting grass. And Mr. Funk sees me doing that a lot. I like cutting my grass. So, you know, might as well tell Kelsey and Rhett, y'all sit out here and pick the grass. It'll be fun. But seriously, you know, that's kind of off track. But when I saw it just there, I'm telling y'all, we need to pray for our world. We really need to pray for our world because it is just going down quickly. And I think about my kids. If God hadn't returned by then and they have kids, I can't imagine. People be marrying animals by then. They'll allow that. But all we can do, we can't let that, can't get sidetracked from it. We got to keep being the people that God wants us to be. Has anybody got anything?
Yeah, so when you talk about leadership, I was thinking, I got friends I've witnessed to, and you know, they're what we would call good people, moral people. I mean, just the gospel is just going to hear it, you know, because it's not works oriented. I think the other thing we see in our churches today, when you talked about Naaman, people listen. I believe when a husband is the leader of his home, the family will follow. And that's part of the problem in America today. We don't have men that lead their families. And you'd be surprised, you know, and a lot of women do a great job of bringing up their kids and everything. But when you don't have that leader in there, it's hard to do.
Yeah, I thought about that.
You know, and your kids will have, you know, I think of my brother-in-law Jim is just a great Christian to me. Just how the whole family, 14 grandkids, you know, they just all love the Lord. You know, and it makes such a difference. But leadership is more than, you know, some position somewhere. You know, just doing what's right.
And, you know, I think about that, and it's not, I'm just talking to the men out there, I guess young men now, talking to myself, because I know I'm no perfect Christian. And Hannah can tell you, I beat up myself, and I don't beat up people, but I'm saying, like, I'm hard. I don't know why, I can't get it out of me. And a lot of times when I think, man, I can be doing better. And sometimes I just kind of get down, and I'm like, I'm just not the Christian I need to be. But then I see Kelson saying Jesus, and she knows things. She watches Vacation Bible School videos of herself, like dancing and up, and you know she wants to come to church. And it picked her up last week. She thought we were going to Vacation Bible School. I said, no, baby, there's no Vacation Bible School. But it's like, and I'm not bragging on myself. I'm really not. But I'm just talking out there to say, like, that's when I feel like God is talking through them to us, saying you're doing something. You know, obviously we can do better, but your kid is somewhat understanding what you're talking about. So that's how I get motivation sometimes, just if I feel like I'm not doing everything I can, and I know I'm not, but, you know, I think God uses our kids to talk to us a lot of ways, and sometimes we need to listen to them more.
You know, sometimes your kids reflect back to you how you're doing. I remember I was working 2 jobs, and I was exhausted, and I put the kids to bed, and I didn't pray with them, and one of my kids said to me, don't you love God? You didn't pray with us. See, they brought it right back to you.
Yep.
I was tired, and, you know, and so they'll reflect back to you what you're doing.
Well, Hannah, you know, had started, you know, with putting your hands like this, Kelsey. So the other night when I went to pray, or last night when we went to pray, we was all three there, and I closed mine and started praying, and she started pitching a fit, and I couldn't figure out why. And she wanted me to put my hands like that, so I had to put my hands like that, or we were not praying. So, anyways, but.
Connor, I actually have two things to say. The one thing you just said about the younger generation, I haven't been to a country concert in quite some time.
I'd recommend not.
So, somewhere that we do go is to Naaman's ball games. And you would be surprised at the 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old boys that sit around when they're not playing ball, if their game's coming up next and we have to sit around them, the language that they're using. And I have to keep on from jumping them, because she's ready for pounds.
Yep.
And, Naaman, of course, is raised around some language from his own family, but, I won't speak on that too much, but he has been taught by his parents not to talk that way, and not to talk that way in public, and, and not even that you shouldn't do it because you love the Lord, but because college recruiters are constantly hanging around those games, and they don't like that. They still watch for young men that have, integrity and good manners and things like that. And it's just unbelievable. We sit there and it's all full language that, only dirty old men used when I was growing up, And so, it just, what you said, yeah, I get it, because the younger generation is just, it's awful. But the other thing, y'all remember Chris, because two people that he was in Penfield with just a couple of months ago have chosen to take their own lives in the past couple of weeks. So it's really hit them really hard.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about marrying animals and stuff. There's something called birthing something. Really is existing where children identify as animals. Yeah. So it's on the brink of what you're saying. So.
Well, it's like I sent Joey an article, you and Adam, about, what was it? It was like abortion is never mentioned in the Bible. So,
Yeah, that's a seminary teacher, professor, what the Bible doesn't say about abortion.
yeah.
Trying to-
Needless to say, it mentions murder hundreds of times. But it's not. Yep. Good news is that, hey, if you know Jesus, one day we won't have to worry about this world. David, you want to close us?
Father, thank you again for the blessing to be here, Lord. What a wonderful time it is, Lord. We thank you for this message, Lord, that went out today, Lord. We ask that it would fall on receptive hearts and minds. Lord, that we know our world is changing. Lord, your word says it's going to change that way. And Lord, so we shouldn't be surprised when it does. But Lord, we just have to look to you and know that your return is getting more imminent when we see these things. And that is our duty, Lord, to try to spread the word, Lord, that you are the answer, that you are returning again, and this world needs to be prepared, Lord. And it can start right here with us, Lord. We know you can do mighty things with a small amount of people. We ask that you would do that through us, Lord, and help us to be a shining light more every day, Lord. Lord, just thank you again for just allowing us to be here, Lord. Lord, let us never take that for granted, Lord, for it is a blessing that we might not be able to have someday. But Lord, just guide us and strengthen us now. Let's go through the remainder of this day, Lord. I ask that everything be done in accordance to your will.